Earlier, I spoke to Sam Burns, Chief Strategist at Mill Street Research, for further analysis of the inflation reading. Here he is. Sam, thank you very much for your time today this afternoon. So another day, another inflation reading, so we have to talk about it. How did you feel about this one, PCE Price Index?
Well, I think this one today luckily came in pretty much right on expectations. So there were no real surprises in either the inflation data or in the income or spending data. So most of it was pretty much in line and didn't seem to have changed the market's view too much overall in response to it. The general consensus seems to be that inflation is not quite where the Fed wants it, but it's getting close. And these numbers were generally, pretty decent. If we get more of numbers like this, we'll probably, get closer to the Fed's target. And it certainly was not a surprise or negative surprise to the bond market. So we've had yields come down some today after they backed up a little bit in the last week or so. So I think it's generally a kind of a relief.
Now, I'm sure there are some out there who's worrying that potentially inflation may be stuck or sticky here. What are your thoughts?
I think the measurement of inflation, I think, is sticky a little bit. I don't know if actually inflation is. My guess is that there's still some issues in the data about housing and shelter costs that are still kind of lagged. And so that's keeping particularly the services component of the inflation data higher than it might otherwise be because of the way they measure it. I think most of the components of the PCE or the CPI are generally in kind of a slowing inflation trend. I think that'll continue over the rest of the year. So my view has generally been that inflation is on its way back to that 2% level that the Fed wants to see. It's just a matter of kind of how bumpy the path is for the data to get there. But I think we will get there.
Right, and speaking of the Federal Reserve, we have to talk about that. More likely or less likely to deliver a rate cut after today's report?
This report probably doesn't change a whole lot. I think they're probably still looking at sometime, towards the later part of the year to start cutting rates. I think they'll need to see the actual year-over-year inflation numbers, come down a little bit further and be stable before they can come out and say, okay, it's okay to cut rates now, unless I guess we see real weakness in, say, the labor market or in spending or something. If it looks like the economy is actually getting weak enough to be a concern. So far, it doesn't seem to be. It still seems to be holding up relatively well. So right now, the Fed seems pretty content to kind of sit on the sidelines with tight policy and just kind of wait and see for a few more months at least.
Okay, speaking of the Fed feeling confident, I mean, how many months do you think exactly of good inflation readings do we need before the Fed actually does indeed feel confident?
My guess would be that, given where we are now, if we had, 2 or 3 months of, good inflation data, meaning, the month-on-month changes being 0.2% or less, would probably be enough to kind of shift their thinking that, okay, that's enough persistence and stability to argue that a rate cut could be done without, causing inflation. So I think that probably another 2 or 3 months of decent data will probably be enough for them to see it, as long as the data don't show any real upside surprises.
All right. Always great to hear your thoughts, Sam. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.